Shit. What's up, boys? Let's watch this shit. Oh. All right. Testing. You got that? Okay, we're good there. There. All right, boys, let's do this. Welcome to the One Punch Man Overwatch crossover reaction Fantastica. Hair on the mic. Let's get into this, boys. I'm so excited. This is like the one anime I've watched.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Overwatch 2 Dev Chat. We have a stacked lineup of developers and leadership from Team 4 here to talk about Overwatch's first anime collaboration ever, One Punch Man. I'm Jody from the Overwatch team, and I'm joined by my epic host duo Q Zoe and game director Aaron. Would y'all like to introduce yourselves?
How?
Yeah, sure.
Hi.
Thank you so much, Jody. I am so thrilled to be here with you today and pick the developer's brain about this super cool collaboration, which that one took me by surprise, I'm not gonna lie. When I saw that popping up on my timeline, I was like, excuse me, what now?
Yeah,
so I can't wait to dig into this.
Yeah, I can't wait to also. This is a pretty exciting moment to talk about, and it's like a pretty exciting moment for the team to be able to work with One Punch Man.
That's awesome. And today we're actually launching the Overwatch One Punch Man collaboration. So you can jump into the game right now and experience it. And, you know, I think our trailer really said it best. So in case you missed the YouTube premiere, let's have a look at the Overwatch One Punch Man trailer.
Let's see it. Really cool I did do test for him.
Ready for a knockout?
So sick.
Normal punch.
That's so
Now
sick.
that was a serious punch.
Well, that was great, and I'm so excited to kick off the discussion and to dive in a little deeper to where this collaboration originated. So, Aaron, can you walk us through kind of the original idea for this collaboration with One Punch?
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, so the whole team, the Overwatch team, we love our game. We love the universe of Overwatch and telling the stories and showing the personalities of the different heroes that we have and the locations that you go to. But the Overwatch team doesn't just love Overwatch. We're geeks at heart. There's all sorts of other fictional worlds that we've fallen in love with, and One Punch Man, it's at the top of the list for us. And so we want to be able to celebrate other universes and other characters and other worlds. And for us, like, one of the best ways to do that is to be able to bring them into our own world and play with the characters that we love from One Punch Man. And the idea is when we started talking about doing other collaborations with other fictional universes, and we kind of started zeroing on anime, One Punch Man was just at the top of the list because it's so endearing to watch, and the characters feel like they're their own version of sort of larger than life real characters, just like we have in Overwatch. So it's just like a really great natural fit for us.
I'd love to know though where this kind of shift in the stance is coming from, because historically the Overwatch team was more or less, I don't want to say against bringing in other characters or other universes, but there's definitely been pushback on that. Why the sudden change?
Yeah, there has been a change. It hasn't been overnight. It's been a gradual change for the team. And when we first released Overwatch, we wanted to be very protective of our heroes and our universe, and we wanted to keep we wanted to give it as much space as possible so that people could really understand what our world was like, this like amazing inspirational near future earth with all these really cool heroes in it. We wanted people to understand who all those heroes were, but over time we started loosening that. Even the skins we started making for those heroes, we started pushing them more. We eventually started doing skins of other Blizzard universes. We even did a Bastion skin, a Lego Bastion skin at one point. So we started opening up once we felt like the world of Overwatch was established enough. And then if you look at the gaming landscape, there's a lot of collaborations happening out there, and it was really interesting for us to watch some of that happening because it let us analyze what we felt comfortable with and what we wouldn't feel comfortable with that other games were doing. So there was this great lesson. There is collabs out there that I could get really excited about in other games, and we started to look at that and say like, hey, we want some of that in Overwatch also. We want people to be able to look at our game and see other really cool things in it, and be able to relate to those and celebrate those other universes.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reaction from the community speaks volumes of just how excited everyone was to see One Punch Man popping off in Overwatch.
I am excited to see like what else they come up with as far as like the new collaborations and stuff, other than just like One Punch Man. I think it'd be awesome. Imagine a Nintendo team up. That'd be sweet.
So I'm wondering what that means for One Punch Man now. What does it mean for One Punch Man to exist in the Overwatch universe?
Yeah, okay. So I love One Punch Man. I've watched the series like multiple times. And so like first and foremost, we just want to like celebrate something that we love inside of our game. You know, it's just like pretty amazing. The characters and that world that they've developed are pretty amazing. And so to do it, we have like our own take on what One Punch Man looks like inside of Overwatch. And it's these values that we have will probably bring these forward into the future as we start looking at other collaborations that we could be doing. But first and foremost is Overwatch. It's a pretty competitive, very fast-paced game. And so at any moment, you need to be able to look at the screen in front of you and be able to tell in a split second what your team is doing, what the enemy team is doing, who they're composed of, and all of the silhouettes, the animation, the VFX, the audio effects of all of our heroes are a huge part in players being able to translate that visual information. So even though we are dressing up Doomfist, let's say, as Saitama, we want people playing the game to be able to instantly say, that's Doomfist over there. So it's still using Doomfist voice actor. It's still using the same visual effects, or mostly the same visual effects, but everyone will be able to look at it and be like, this is Doomfist running around. And on top of that, we still think of the Overwatch universe as a cohesive space. It has its own history, its own lore, its own characters, and we want to preserve that as much as we can. So as we bring the One Punch Man characters into Overwatch, we're doing it almost as costumes, that it really are just skins for the heroes that we have. But at the end of the day, we want to be able to represent and celebrate the characters from One Punch Man, but not to replace our own.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like when we say like Doomfist is a fan of One Punch Man. He's a fan of Saitama, and us putting that in the game is a reflection of us and like the Overwatch team. Like we're really big fans of One Punch as well.
Yeah, you never suspect that Doomfist would be such a fan of such a quirky character.
Yeah.
And he's pausing the video.
This is really exciting though. And you know, what does this really mean for Overwatch and like for the possibility of maybe future collaborations?
Ooh, okay. So I mean, when we launched Overwatch 2, we put as much effort as we could into supporting the game. We've talked a lot about how we've grown the team a lot and reorganized the team, and we have this focus of trying to always be evolving the game to best suit like the needs and desires of the people playing it. We just want to always be making more Overwatch for people and for people to see what we're coming out with and to be excited for it. That's what the One Punch Man collaboration is about, and we can see online that so far it feels like people have had like a really positive reaction to it, and they're really excited about what we're doing, and we even see them putting out ideas of other collaborations we can do and matching our heroes up to characters in other universes. And so I think if something like this goes well, it will just give us the confidence that this is what players want from us, and this is the sort of thing that we ought to keep doing. I'm not sure if we'll ever get to the point where this is like something we do every single season. We still want to push the narrative and the world of Overwatch forward all on its own, but this could become a regular part of Overwatch in the future.
I mean, I wouldn't want that to happen every season either,
Yeah.
right? Like, it should be a special treat we're getting with it.
I like the way you put that. There you go. That's going to go into the values. It's a special.
Perfect.
Special treat. Huh?
It's a really cool way to show that like we're fans of the things that our community are fans of, and you know we like to geek out over things too. And One Punch is really special.
Like that.
Yeah.
Relatable. We love to see that. I'm wondering, Erin, for you or your team, was there like a really big fanboy or fangirl moment during that collab?
Yes. Okay. So I love the show. There's a lot of people on the team that love the show. And as we started talking about what it would mean to translate the show into Overwatch, we had multiple brainstorming sessions over it. And so that's like one of the funnest parts of this is just talking about what different characters we could use, you know, like Tornado, Kariko, like all of that stuff is really fun, but there was so many different things we talked about that didn't make it, you know, like, hey, are we going to be able to use Gyarados or Sea King, or is there some weird like censored version of like Puri Puri Reinhardt out there, you know? It's just like crazy stuff that we gotta kind of like talk about and have fun with. But I think that once we started actually implementing a lot of this stuff, there's two moments. The first was when they started getting the lobby together of just that sort of in joke of Saitama training with 100 push-ups, 100 squats, you know, the 10-kilometer run. Like, it's a pretty amazing lobby. We've never really had something like that before. But my favorite thing was the first time I saw the Justice Crash highlight intro. It's like such an amazing highlight intro. And the funny thing is earlier in season 3, we released Hanzo's Cupid Kiss highlight intro, which I just thought we would never be able to top, right? Like that is like S tier highlight intro. It's so cool. And then Justice Crash comes along and it's like, oh my God, which one of these is better than the other? So yeah, it's just been fun, like, all the way
I
around.
really like Aaron Keller, man.
It's so good. Soldier as Moomin Rider makes me so happy.
Yeah.
Like those two are actually a match made in heaven.
Yeah, I love it. Not to speak about the balance of Soldier 76 or anything like that, you know. Maybe they're not a match made in heaven on that front, but yeah.
Maybe not.
So for the next balance patch, we removed all abilities for Soldier 76 to match the skin.
Yes, exactly. His new alternate ability is like Bloody Nose or something like that.
Just a guy who helps out on the sidelines, man. That's it.
I actually love Moomin Rider. This is just my own take, but he feels like the real hero of that show. So like Saitama has like these massive, amazing abilities. And Moomin Rider doesn't really have any, but he's still like first on the scene. He's always responding. He's like the person that's really putting their life on the line to help other people, even in like the face of like certain defeat.
Yeah, no, he's showing up with courage. So I can respect that. Not necessarily with any abilities or skills, which that's unfortunate. But A for effort.
He's answering the call. The world could always use more heroes.
He really is. I love that.
I'm so happy that we get to share this with players now. And, it was really incredible watching everything go from like that idea, the brainstorming sessions, and like becoming a reality and finally making it to the live game. So everyone, we're super amped. We're super amped. This is finally in game. This collaboration's finally live. So.
Yep. I am too. Like, cannot wait to see people's reactions to all the things that we have in the game. It's a really exciting time for us.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Aaron. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us more of an insight into the collaboration. This is a legendary moment for Overwatch and for One Punch. So we really appreciate you being here to answer our questions.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. It was great.
Yeah.
Thanks
awesome.
so much.
Thanks, Aaron.
Bye.
Bye.
Zoe and I are joined by two of my incredible teammates to dive a little deeper into the development process of the One Punch Man collaboration. So I'd love for you guys to introduce yourselves and kind of give us a little insight onto your role on this team. Do you mind kicking us off, Dion?
Yeah, hey, I'm Dion Rogers. I'm the art director for Overwatch 2.
My name is Rakan Kamash. I'm a senior character artist on the Overwatch team. I'm responsible for creating characters and skins that you guys see in the game.
Awesome.
I am so excited to be able to pick both of your brains today about this particular collaboration. So I want to run back to the very beginning of it, and I want to hear from you. Why did we end up with those specific characters? Why those specific characters, not just from One Punch Man, but also from the Overwatch universe?
Yeah, when we first started to think about, okay, we're ready to do a collaboration with an anime, One Punch Man was a pretty big one for the team. Everyone was super excited. And so as we were announcing it, that's why Rakan was just like, literally like, as we were telling the team, this is what we're going to do, and it's a go. Rakan started blocking out Doomfist. It was like crazy. He's just like, he grabbed Doomfist, he was posting little images on our little Slack channel, and we're just like, whoa, that actually looks pretty cool, right?
So Doom was really the starting point. Like Saitama was our...
Yes, right. And Rakan, feel free to jump in if...
going back to that meeting, I remember we, sitting in like everyday meeting. It's all going good. And then boom, One Punch Man collab. I'm like, hold up, wait a minute. What is this? And then I saw the concept. Shout out to Kijun for the awesome concept.
It looks
I was
so
like,
fucking
I need
good.
to get on this. Like, I need to work on it. So I hit up my producer. I'm like, I don't know who's working on this. I don't know if it's already assigned. I need it. It needs to be mine. I'm a huge fan of, One Punch Man.
Yeah.
And I started working on the Blackout, like Dion said. Just took it from there.
So it made sense that obviously Saitama would be Doomfist. He's basically our One Punch Man in our universe. And if you notice the heroes, so we decided, we learned Aaron Keller, our game director, is a big fan of One Punch. So he knew the characters really well in a lot of their lore. And so as the character team and the concept artist started to dig in, we decided that's how we started to develop which characters made sense to be who. And we'll dig a little bit more into Doomfist in just a moment. But literally because Rakan started to block out, he has to stay Saitama. But Genos being Genji just made sense from a silhouette perspective and the way the characters look in their combination from the show. And then Moomin Rider 76, it was just so fun. He's a kind of a fun character for us already. So Moomin Rider becoming 76 was a pretty awesome collab.
Yeah, and walk us through some of the concept art or through some of the early development stages. Like you mentioned that like Genji and Genos, they share similar silhouettes. Like what does that mean? So
gameplay-wise, Overwatch is a very fast-paced game. So we're going to dig into Doomfist here. Saitama has a cape that's a pretty iconic look for this hero in One Punch Man. So we needed to add a cape to Doomfist. which is a big deal. This changes Doomfist's silhouette significantly. And so when you're playing Overwatch, tactically, you're looking for certain silhouettes. We do a lot of work behind the scenes when we're developing a hero they have a certain shape, a certain size that's eventually becomes recognizable to the players.
You can see the original Doomfist, that the one that we already have in the game, and the first thing, like Dion said, we need to test out the cape. So I did a quick blockout of that model, and then I submitted to our tech team that we want to test out how's that's going to work with his movement. Because again, if you think about Doomfist, he's not like your average character, just he walks straight, or he's always jumping, doing crazy moves. So we did this blockout test, and it was successful. And then we got the green light to move with the other parts. Here you can see more. We call this a blockout stage because it's basically just throwing big blocks and making sure we represent the concept in early stage to test out. For example, the belt needs to be smaller, bigger. We need to move parts around. And,
so this is him going from like normal Doom to we're dressing him. We're putting him in the block out for
exactly.
Saitama Doomfist.
Yeah.
We start to test out in the game too as well, right? We get this block out in game, and we get a feel for how fighting this hero now feels.
Here you can see him actually in game, but again, there isn't much details going on. Just a quick color and the model. And after everybody's like he's good to go, we move to we call it the high poly stage. This is where we put all the details. Like you can see all the pants. He got the seams on the sides. He got the armor pieces. And after that, we go back to something we call the low poly, which is like the clean mesh that you guys see in the engine. And here you can see him with all the textures and the lighting in the engine.
That's so crazy.
How much of the characters which were selected from the One Punch universe were selected based on their silhouette matching up with one of the heroes, and how much of it was just like, well, it's a favorite of ours, so we have to bring him in?
I think a lot of it came from a favorite of ours. So we have a pretty varied cast of characters. So surprisingly, a lot of people just fit automatically, but a lot of it mostly it came from the team. Just that's their favorite characters from the show. And you can see that the characters are kind of cosplaying the heroes from One Punch Man. It's not Saitama's literally in the game. It's Doomfist wearing a costume that is very reflective of Saitama. He's a big fan himself. So that's kind of our approach for whenever we do a collab like this. Is that our heroes enjoy the universe just as much as we do in real life, and they're kind of cosplaying as the heroes from that universe.
That's actually so funny, because if you now think about Kiriko cosplaying as Tatsumaki being such a edgelord kind of character and such a like arrogant kind of edgy person, and Kiriko seems so wholesome and sweet. So I love that she wants to cosplay as a dark one.
Yeah, that's right.
Damn, that's a sick
I actually want to talk about something that Jan just mentioned is, our characters are cosplaying, the One Punch Man right now. So one of the challenges that
I thought it was
we kind of ran into is in the original concept that we did, he had a lot of muscles. And then if you look at, Saitama in the anime, it's like super simple, just a yellow shirt, red gloves, that's it. Like he doesn't have much going on. So the tricky part was to make sure we add enough details so it still looks like Doomfist, but at the same time, you can tell it's Saitama. So one way, to go around these challenges was like for the shirt, for example, it's just yellow. So we do something in Overwatch where we add gradients. It's like a cool way of adding details without making something too noisy. And same thing pretty much with the gloves and the boots. We just added a little bit of gradients because, again, we're trying to make it match the concept, but at the same time still make it look like it's in the Overwatch world.
Awesome. You kind of went into some of the challenges for development. I'm curious, like from a design perspective, what was it like putting like these color palettes in game, or creating the meshes that you're talking about?
I mean, it was really awesome, like to see that concept and then figure out how are we gonna make it work in our world, because we want to keep the IP looking like it is. At the same time, we still want to represent Overwatch language in our characters. So we did a couple of tests. We changed a couple small parts here and there just so it kind of flows better and it's not as noisy. And at the same time, you look at it like from this, it looks simple, just like Saitama is.
And I know finally seeing this in game was a really significant moment for our team. And like when we're sharing that information internally with one
All
another,
textures look so
like
good,
it's
man.
very common for a Zoom call to devolve into a Twitch chat very quickly with how excited everyone is. Especially when they start hearing like that theme music, things start coming together like in the trailers, and you know, everyone's just completely stoked for this.
We had a lot of fun because, again, we realized there were so many fans on the team that you just never knew until we started to talk about this. Even the lobby we worked on for the scene is the one punch challenge where he's doing the 100 squats, the 100 sit-ups. And you literally, Doomfist does the entire exercise. If you watch the lobby, he will do all 100 of each step. And then walk off and do the running too, but he comes back. And the time of day change it was so fun because at first we had like a truncated version of it.
So awesome.
But we felt pretty strongly to just like, Doomfist could pull this off. He could actually do the full exercise. So it's a fun thing if you want to watch. It's like 5 minutes long, the lobby.
I remember you saying the original was like 30 seconds, and then you were like, no, we have to do the whole thing.
Yep.
That's
I love
so
for people
cool,
who are not watching this right now, who are just sitting in that screen trying to figure out if it's the whole sequence. So some people will 100% just like wait it out and see.
Yeah, that's what we hope, and people get the joke, basically. But I think that shows just how strong some of the fans on the team were. The animation team really pushed for. It actually took a little bit of tech adjustment to allow a lobby to have this level of keyframing that lasted so long. Because usually our lobbies are pretty quick and they're beautiful but quick. Yeah. This one is just 5 minutes of watching Doofus do this amazing exercise that was a pretty awesome challenge in real life, right? It's a lot of people used to do this as a great goal of theirs to be able to achieve this exercise. So Doomfist being one of our strongest heroes, he could totally do it.
Not to mention everybody on the team that worked on this collab had to do that workout, like the full workout.
Of course. It's a rite of passage, right? Yeah. Now, obviously, like from a viewer's perspective, like we love the anime or the manga. We see it in one of our favorite games. That's huge. People get so excited about collaborations like that. What was it like for you guys in the team? Because being able to work on something which is still within your, day-to-day business, it's Overwatch, it's what you work on, but then you get to add like something you're a fan of. What was that like?
Phil, I think both Khan and I can answer this, but we actually wanted to do this for a long time. It's just finding the right group to collab with. Working with Bandai has been super fun, and we wanted to figure out what it meant for Overwatch to take this step. It's a pretty big step for us as an IP. We already have this huge IP with amazing heroes in it.
That would be so sick if they got Street Fighter.
Groups that have amazing heroes too. How do we integrate those into our game?
And like to me personally, I remember when I saw the concept, like Dion said, I had the blockout ready in no time just because of like how excited I am. And I had other stuff like going on. I had to finish, and I told the priest, I will make it work. You don't worry about that. I got it. I'll make it work.
Amazing. Yeah,
and everybody on the team were like super excited about seeing the concept, seeing the whole thing, just in the engine and the custom stuff that we did it. It just shows like how everybody on the team were like super excited and just happy like we're doing this kind of collabs now.
Yeah. And finding One Punch as the first one was awesome,
Yeah, definitely.
I like saying that like this was really the, right partnership for us in a sense, because like their IP and our IP really go together really well, and seeing our heroes come to life as their characters or like representing their characters it's really special. Were there any other moments like I know we've mentioned Doomfist and kind of the blockout for his Saitama skin, but were there any other moments with, say, the other skins, Genos or Tornado Kiriko, that really stood out to you guys?
I mean, I can talk about Genos because my friend Bao, he worked on that skin, and we were both geeking out the whole thing so much. Just when we saw the concept, I'm like, I got to work on this. And I said, I got to work on Doomfist. And we both, while working, we kept sharing updates because we were just so happy about it and excited.
That's so cool.
This one is basically because just how much I get excited about these things. I decided that, you know what, just showing it in the engine is not enough. I want to take it to the next level, and I just throw this like cool cinematic rendering of it,
Yeah.
like just to show you guys like how excited. And again, while working on this, we're not sure if we're like able to share it or not. But to us, just how excited we get about these things, we try to do extra stuff just to get the whole team like super excited about it too and hyped.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure at least 75% of our team has that as our background right now.
Yeah, sure.
It's a really popular, we really like this.
Genos was interesting because during the concepting phase, this is where we learned where too much. At one point, he looked too much like Genos. We've lost the Overwatch hero, and so we peeled it back a little just to find the sweet spot before we model. We do a lot of testing with just the concept, the 2D drawing, to make sure the Overwatch hero remains while still celebrating, the Genos as a character. So he was one that in some of the concepting phases actually was pushed a little too far, and then we kind of peeled him back.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I'm kind of curious about Kiriko and Moomin Rider, if there were any highlights from working on either of those heroes. I know for Moomin Rider, I'm probably just as excited for the highlight intro as I am the skin itself. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, Moomin Rider, it just made sense because we have this kind of Sentai skin for 76 already, and then the character in the show is kind of like that. He's like a play on this category of entertainment, so it just felt even more funny that in game we were literally taking kind of an evolution of a model we already had, made him look like Moomin, and then we even did the highlight reel with the cool anime lines going behind it as he rides. It just started to, you could just see it. The whole team was just having fun with this one. There was much more we wanted to do, but obviously time and production costs, we just had to really focus on the heroes that made sense. But hopefully we do more in the future.
I really love that our team had fun with this, and that's probably one of the highlights. I'm curious if you can share any fanboy moments from working on this partnership. Any highlights for either of you?
I mean, I can say I watched it again like 60 times after I just had to watch it again. Yeah. Because while watching it, I wanted to pick up, I don't know, some small thing that I can put on the skin that kind of, yeah. So I watched it again and again, just wanted to pick up, some small details here and there that I can add to the skin. And hopefully like fans will pick them up because they're not super, just out there showing, but they're like hidden. So I'm interested to see if anybody's got to spot it.
Yeah, I just thought the fact that we were doing it in general. I watched the series already, but then started watching it again and again and again. So it felt like, okay, we did find the right show to collab with.
Absolutely. I know that I'm going to be in game looking for those details too. I was new to the series, but when I found out we were doing this collaboration, I immediately watched it, and the intro song is what grabbed me. From then I was like, okay, yeah, this is my vibe. I'm really going to like this. So, I'm really excited that this is in game, and I know that our community is too.
Well, I'm going to say this now, and I feel sorry for everybody that's going to be in my game. I'm really bad with Doomfist, but I will be playing Doomfist because of this skin, so just a heads up.
I'm not too bad with Doomfist, so I'm really excited to pick this skin up.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, this is Overwatch's, first major anime collaboration, and players can jump into the game. It's live right now. So whether you want to pick up the cosmetics, try your hand at Doomfist, or count the reps in Doom's workout, jump in game right now and have a blast. Thank you, Dion, and thank you, Rakan, for joining us and sharing your thoughts and experiences. It's always a joy talking to both of you, and we really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Zoe.
See ya.
Bye. No, we have a heck of a topic lined up for this next segment. That's a bit of a conversation starter in the community, but it's also something incredibly significant to our team. We're joined by some really incredible folks on Team 4 who are going to walk us through some of the competitive and matchmaking updates that we're going to see here in the mid-cycle patch. Scott, would you please kick off intros and give us a little overview on your role on the team?
Sure thing, Jody. Hi, everyone. I'm Scott Mercer. I'm the lead meta designer on Overwatch 2. And that doesn't mean I'm responsible for the hero meta. Nope, that's not me. Not at all.
Different meta.
It's different meta completely. What I do on the team is work with Morgan on matchmaking. I also work on competitive systems, player interaction and trust. I interact with esports teams. And yeah, I'm really excited to talk with Morgan today about matchmaking.
Hi, I'm Morgan. I'm a senior engineer on Team 4. I also mostly focus on matchmaking and ranked, so I actually work with Scott kind of an uncanny amount. But yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Welcome on in, you guys, and thanks for joining us on this again. So Morgan, to kick us off, will you kind of give us a recap on the matchmaking updates that went in at the beginning of Season 3? What were those updates, and kind of what are some of the things that we're seeing and observing so far?
Yeah, so Season 3 was really big for matchmaking. It was kind of, right after Overwatch 2 launched, actually, we were kind of thinking about like what we wanted to prioritize next. And kind of the overwhelming thing that we wanted to do was what we've called the role delta change, which is minimizing the role delta between the two teams. And so what that means is, before any of these changes went live, we were pretty willing to make a match that could have like a diamond level tank against a gold level tank, say. And even if the rest of the match was fairly balanced, in terms of like the ratings of the two teams, that matchup just didn't feel very fun. And so, those matches had a 50% win rate, but like it still didn't feel like a good match. And so we kind of wanted to see how well we could minimize the delta between the roles. And so we wanted to do that not just for the tanks, but for all the roles on each team. And that actually took a really long time. It was definitely the largest kind of architectural change that we've made to the matchmaker since role queue, even back in 2019. So we did that over a few stages. We kind of got like an easy win in I think it was like the Season 2 patch. And then since that point, we were kind of making iterative improvements. And so Season 3 is kind of the culmination of that work where, we've kind of like fully pivoted the matchmaking architecture to be able to kind of like reason about packing players into matches that in a way that minimizes this delta and keeps it so that the teams have kind of like this balanced role. This property is kind of weird. It's kind of hard to like get it for free. And so we actually kind of had to rethink a lot of the different components of the matchmaker in order to actually solve this problem well, not just in the normal case, but also kind of in the worst case, be able to do this, kind of in all cases. So that was kind of the big thing that changed in Season 3. Because of that, there was a whole lot of parts that we expected to get worse as a result of that. Kind of like in matchmaking, you don't really get anything for free. So by minimizing the role delta in these matches, we've kind of we've slightly impacted like other aspects of match quality that we're looking at. And some of that we kind of expected going into it because we just knew this was such a big change. But at the same time, there are some things that we were kind of surprised at. Like, I was a little bit surprised at how our expected win rate, normally we try to make matches that are 50-50. Mm-hmm. Our average expected win rate got a little bit worse by optimizing for role delta. And that's kind of unintuitive. Like you would think, all of these measures of good matches would kind of like correlate together. But they kind of don't. If you make the one ideal match where everybody has the same exact rating, then it's just a good match and we're willing to make it. But oftentimes we can't do that. And so it's kind of like, which thing do we give up on first? And so we've still been tuning the system a lot. Like ever since it launched, I think we've We've probably made a tuning adjustment almost every
Yeah.
day at this point.
Yeah.
And we're still going, like we're still learning. And a lot of that has just been, seeing what goes wrong and seeing how we can kind of like tweak things to make things a little bit better. So yeah.
That sounds like some huge infrastructure kind
Yeah,
of
like
changes
the
going
big
on there, right?
architecture.
Yeah. So how was that perceived by the community? Like, what was the how did they react? Because you said it has a lot of side effects if you make such big changes, like queue times are going to be affected. What was the consensus and the feedback you were given after implementing such big changes?
That's a really good question. It's very hard to actually say with certainty, like, how much better things got. We have measures that we look at that kind of ground us in like, okay, we did actually make, most of our matches now have these very close roll deltas. And, and like, we've seen a lot of community feedback. I would say it's mostly been positive. I don't know. It's a little hard to say for sure.
Yeah, it's when you think of all of Overwatch 2 matchmaking, there's a lot of different people that are affected by this. We're going to talk a lot about competitive play, but like this change actually mostly affects quick play or affects quick play to an even larger degree because their groups can be even more different in terms of like the groups you can form. In competitive play, there are restrictions on who you can group with. You can't have like a bronze player group with a grandmaster player. You just can't. In quick play, all those things are possible. Yeah. You get some really and you get some really crazy groups, and the matchmaker has to do the best it can with it. And it's all this new roll delta tech that allows us to, create what we think are like overall like better matches for those groups. And then there are absolutely groups in competitive play too. So we get some benefits there, but like for the people that do play in groups with like different skilled players in quick play, all the feedback we've been getting is it's been great.
Yeah.
In some cases, the queue times have been a little bit like longer because
that's really the main downside that we've heard so far is, especially for large groups, their queue times have gotten a little worse, and that was a little bit unexpected. I was hoping that wouldn't get bad. It didn't show up in the simulations that we did. But we have some ideas for how to improve that going forward. It'll probably just take another patch to really get it good. But yeah, it's kind of funny. We get a lot of feedback. We see the metrics, and then we also play the game a lot, right? Like, ultimately, that's kind of the best way to ground yourself in like what this change has done. And I personally have been able to feel this change. It's really interesting. Especially when you're playing tank, but even with the other roles, you can kind of tell now, like, who your rival is on the enemy team, because we're really trying to match you with somebody who's very close to your skill level. And, now in the average case, that person, like in ranked, for example, is like within one division of you, so they're very, very closely matched with you. And so you can really kind of feel, a little bit more of like that rivalry where it's like, are you winning that matchup or losing that matchup? And it's like, it's not like you're just going to get stomped either way. Like that's going to be a pretty close match. And there's kind of a feel to it that I've thought is really cool. Yeah. Of course, there's like the other areas where like, we're making slightly wider matches now in terms of the, if you look at like the best player minus the worst player, that's gotten a little bit wider, also kind of as a result of this change. And so like, that's actually something that we're going to be trying to improve. We actually anticipated that would get worse as a result of the roll delta change. And so in the mid-cycle, in the 2.3.1 patch, we have some changes going that will actually help shrink that back down, hopefully even to better than it was before. We'll have to wait and see. The simulations were very promising, but the simulations don't usually end up like real life. So
no, for sure, we don't know what the system, like seeing how like our players actually interact with the system is the best way, like for us to learn and take things away from it. And I really like the way that you framed it as a big architectural change to this system, because like you tweak one thing and then you find out that one thing, like you have a goal for what that thing is supposed to change, but then it inadvertently affects these other variables as well. And so it really is a process getting to a place where that feels good for the people that are playing.
Yeah, it's been really interesting too. Like, competitive queue times used to be longer and now they're shorter. And like in retrospect, like the system maybe wasn't actually working as well. Like the new change, it's like we're still making very good matches, but we kind of like for free almost got rid of a lot of the queue time just because, the new system's like a lot smarter and it's kind of this like foundational piece that gives us like a lot more ability to build off of in the future too, which is going to be really cool.
So what about players who queue into matches and they see this wide skill disparity? Like they're queuing in their diamond and they see a golden, or even more so than that, they're queuing in at GM and see like a plat player in their match. Like what's happening there?
Yeah, that's actually funny. So after the season 3 changes, it was a really big change, and so there were a lot of unintended consequences. And one of them was we, for a short period, were making matches that were had a much wider skill disparity. Somebody sent us a match that was like a GM level match with a gold level player.
It might have been two of your colleagues on the Overwatch League cast, Zoe, that sent us a match, and they were like, we were matched with this gold player. It's like, what's up? So we actually went and looked at it.
Yeah, we spent like a couple hours talking.
There was
about
actually a lot of things where we talk about, which is why, again, it's like pointed feedback about some of these things is like so useful to us. But like, we looked at it and it's like, there was a gold. The other things about the match, it's like they didn't realize it's like, the role does stuff was actually working really well. It had a gold on the other team as well.
Yeah, see, but you don't see that, obviously.
No, you don't see that. So that was like, at the same time, it's like, oh, this is bad, but it was kind of good too. It's like, it's like working. It was like working in a way we didn't quite expect. One of the big things about matchmakers is, the matchmaker is like, we put this constraint and it's like, it's like, all right, push this down and like something comes up. It's like, you can't really push everything down all at the same time because you don't have enough hands. So yeah, it was it's definitely like something that we happened, but we know that we know the players don't think that's a high quality match, even if we make one that's technically fair.
It depends on what you're asking, honestly, because it happened to me a bunch of times too. I'm a plat player. I ended up with GM people, and what I took from it was the game complementing my skill, because I was unaware that this could be a bug. I was like, oh, you really think I'm that good? So I should be playing with GM players? Well, thank you so much. Shucks.
Yeah, I've seen feedback like on various like social platforms where it's like, there are a lot of people who are like that, or like, I was super excited to play with these players. I never get to play with these players. It's like, because playing with players that are more skilled than you is actually an interesting learning opportunity.
Yeah.
It's like,
I feel
how
like
do
it
these
makes me
players
better.
play? Yeah.
Yeah, it makes me play better. But obviously that's not how it should be working as intended. So that's not what we're saying.
Obviously it's like we're going to like actually try to prevent that sort of thing from ever happening again.
But
one will sneak through in a blue moon, but like it's but it's definitely interesting.
We were able to make some tuning changes. Like once we saw the problem, because we add so much configurability into every change that we make. So once we saw that problem, we were able to make it better. I mean, we can never like have like a hard like some players will be like, oh, I only ever want to play like these perfect matches or something like that. And like, we ultimately can't do that. We have to kind of like eventually make a match, right? We can't just have somebody stay in queue for 4 hours. And so, this was just one of the things where it was like, we kind of hadn't tuned the system just right. And so we were able to, I think, mostly fix this problem, at least improve it. But it's still something we would like to improve even more. Like, I think, ideally, as fun as it is for the gold player, like, we probably don't ultimately ever really want to make matches that have gold players and GM players together.
Yeah. And that sort of gets back to the point of like high GM players, they're always going to be a challenge for the matchmaker just because there's not that many of you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry, really just hard. Too good. Boo.
It's so like trying to find like a perfect configuration of people at any one time, it's just difficult. So it's why, again, while we've had queue times come down, we've been able to make some adjustments there that I think have been really positive in that regard, but it's always going to be more difficult than your gold or platinum games where we literally have thousands, it's so many like different players, and like it's very easy to come up with much more precise matches.
If you're, silver to platinum, you're getting kind of the high population experience, right? That's like, we have a whole lot of players there, but, once you get really high up, once you're grandmaster level, like, the best way to increase match quality is not any change we can make. It's like, message your friends and tell them to get online, because otherwise, like, there's just nobody to play against,
Yeah. It's
So there's unique problems you need to solve in the different ranks then, right? I mean, it's one system, but it can't really fit all. Very much like hero balancing. You have different balancing issues in bronze as you would have in a GM game.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually... Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, we know that match quality at like high GM takes a nosedive whenever OWL players are scrimming.
Yeah. There's just nobody to play.
It's absolutely a thing. But it's like once they're done with scrims and like, start like, hopping on and playing solo or with someone else. And yeah, all of a sudden it's like, wow, match quality is like so much better.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
So interesting.
It's really kind of interesting. Like at like gold level, it's actually pretty easy to make good matches most of the time. We still have edge cases sometimes, but at that kind of like really high MMR, really the only way, kind of there's like this fundamental trade-off typical in matchmaking, where it's like either you have better match quality or you have and longer queue times, or you have shorter queue times and worse match quality. And like there's kind of this fundamental trade-off there. Like we could make match quality incrementally better by putting people in queue for twice as long. Like the relationship isn't exactly 1-to-1, right? So like pro players will sometimes tell us like, I want better match quality, and we'll be like, well, I could make your queue times twice as long, but that doesn't sound very appealing, right? But like there are some things, long term that we're looking at where we can not just make matches, better in one way by pulling from the other one, but where we can actually be smarter. And the problem there is it's just so hard. Like matchmaking at that high MMR, it's like this impossible problem, but we can be more and more sophisticated. Like I've been kind of looking at it as like, okay, so if this is what the queue looks like and I was like a human trying to make a match, what would I be trying to do? It's hard because it's like we have to encode kind of like the wisdom that we have into a computer program that's making hundreds or thousands of matches a minute, like in this real-time way. But long term, there are some things that we would love to do to try to kind of like start improving match quality at the high MMR. It's just so hard and so experimental. So like you can expect us to definitely try, over the next year or so, some things that hopefully will help. But I can't actually make any promises, because it's like I really have, before we push like a change, like the roll delta change, was like I didn't actually expect the queue times to get a lot faster. I expected match quality to maybe get a little worse, but it's like now I'm like, okay, it didn't exactly turn out that way. So yeah, there's just a whole lot of work that has to go into really making match quality better at that crazy high MMR.
How do you deal with like cross-platform matches then as well?
So in ranked, we just don't let players play cross-platform. So like either you're playing, mouse keyboard, or you're playing in the console pool, and those are just totally separated. And you have separate ranks too. So if you're playing on the same account on both of those ranks, like you can, in theory, you can be like a gold level mouse keyboard player and a diamond level controller player.
That's me. Yeah.
I think it really speaks to how many different variables go into like our matchmaker and making these, like changing the system and the different things that the system can affect, like just by one small little tweak. So thank you for going into that and giving us a little more insight on that. Would this be a good time to kind of look at some of the data that we've observed from this roll delta change and maybe how that's affected the game up until this point?
Yeah, sure. So here's a chart you can see. Here's the average delta between two tanks in a match, a typical match that we make. And damage and support, we don't show them here, but they're very similar. Same dynamic. So you can see when we shipped Overwatch 2, we were making very good matches in general, but we weren't really paying attention to this. And like I said, this isn't really something that kind of you don't naturally get matches that minimize this roll delta without really trying for it. So by default, in competitive, our we were making matches that were like the average tank delta was something like 2 divisions apart, and in quick play it was 3 on average. And average is like about half of the matches are better and about half of the matches are worse. And there was definitely, like, if you look at the worst matches, you don't see them here, but the worst matches were way worse than this. And so at this point it's like the teams are approximately balanced, but especially one of the things that we saw at ship was you might create a match where like the tank on one team is the worst tank or the worst player in the match, and the support player is the best player in the match, and then on the other team it's swapped. And so like that just felt kind of weird. So so we made a couple rounds of changes. The first round came in the season 1 mid-cycle, and that got us a good chunk of the way there. But it wasn't until season 3 where we really were able to kind of like nail both the average case and also make the worst case quite a bit better too. So you can see now in competitive, our average is 1 division, which is very, very close. That's really within the bounds of, are you at that point? It's not really necessarily like an average skill difference. It's like, are you playing well today, or are you like exactly where you're supposed to be in terms of your MMR, things like that. So it feels much closer.
Yeah.
Of course, by minimizing this, you don't really get anything for free in matchmaking. So we can go to the next chart, and you can see by minimizing this roll delta, we actually made our expected win rate of our matches slightly worse. So ideally, we like to make matches that are as close to 50-50 win rate as possible. That's a really important principle for us of match fairness. And at Overwatch 2 ship, we were very close to that. This is median, so you can think 50% of your matches are better than this and 50% of them are worse. And unfortunately, there is kind of a long tail here of progressively worse. But we were very close to 50% for most of our matches at ship. The first roll delta change we made, it was actually a little bit unintended. We didn't realize how much worse it was going to get. So you can see in quick play, especially in the season 1 mid-cycle, the median expected win rate went up to 55%. 55% from my perspective is still not horrible. Like, a 55-45 match, the losing team, or the team that's not favored, still wins 45% of the time. So that's not really something that I think, if you're playing a 45-55 match, you probably won't feel like one side really has a noticeable advantage. But like I said, half of the matches are worse than that, so it got worse. And you can see in season 3 we were able to somewhat improve that. Once we saw the problem, we were able to start kind of bending that curve back down. And this is actually, this is now a higher priority for us going forward. Like, we're going to keep making changes to kind of minimize this even more, because it's really important for us to make matches that are really as fair as possible. The other weird thing about this is actually this expected win rate, it's role agnostic. So that means it doesn't take into account the role MMRs, that role delta. And so this measure getting worse is, in a sense, it looks worse than maybe it is, because by minimizing that difference between the roles, that's also increasing match fairness, just in kind of a different dimension. So, it's a little bit hard to say, did matches get significantly less fair? I don't think so. They might have gotten a little bit less fair. And that's a trade-off that we're making in order to make each individual matchup within the match feel more fair. So, when we talk about match fairness, it's really hard. It's kind of this holistic thing where we're looking at a lot of different factors and trying to balance them. And it's very hard to make this balance. Ultimately, we kind of have to decide which one wins sometimes. And we can't always make every match perfectly, but at this point, I think the role delta changes seem like they're definitely making a positive impact on the game.
I mean, when you're saying, the way it feels in the game, if my individual matchup is closer as a tank, and I'm not just being taken for a walk by the other tank and completely stunned, even if I lose the entire match, if the individual matchup feels closer, then I don't feel like I'm getting the short end of the stick either, right? So I think,
totally.
I think that kind of makes a big difference. But we're seeing in those graphs the frequency going from like season to the next season. What's the philosophy for the systems team here? How often, how frequent do you make changes, bigger changes, smaller changes, any kind of changes to the matchmaking without disrupting too much?
Yeah. So, I mean, going forward, matchmaking is just a huge priority for us in general. With Overwatch 2, we've kind of, the team's larger, we have more time and energy to really devote to making matchmaking as good as it can be. And also, it's just been a learning opportunity for us too. Like, honestly, since we shipped Roll Queue back in 2019, at that point, we had no idea what made Roll Queue matches really good. We had our intuitions from before Roll Queue, but a lot of that turned out to be wrong. And so, at this point, I'd say, we've really, over the past several years, really learned what makes Overwatch matches good. And now that we have the time that we can really devote to doing the work, I mean, I would say we have probably like a year's worth of work that we've talked about in terms of, this roadmap of all of these things that we're aware of. So, in the long term, like this is going to be a huge focus for us going forward, is making large changes, large improvements, almost on a patch by patch basis. And then even smaller than that, like, the season 3 mid-cycle has, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 kind of like smaller changes in it, including the one that I'm really excited about, which will, it will shrink the gap between the best player and the worst player in the match. It'll shrink that somewhat. And the way that one works is actually very interesting because what that change does is all it does is try to match parties that have a similar delta with each other. And you would say like, oh, why do I care? That only affects, parties. But it actually kind of shifts the entire curve of match quality in the direction, in a better direction, because it's like concentrating these parties that are a little bit wider together. And then we can make more matches that have like only solos or, duos that are like well paired, things like that.
That will be mostly felt in quick play then, right? This kind of change.
Yes, it'll be more so in quick play, but even in competitive, like I think it's up to Diamond, that we allow 2 matches up to 2 ranks. So like, if you're a gold level player, you can play with your diamond level friend. That's still a pretty large disparity. That's a much wider range than I think what players would consider an ideal match, right?
Players definitely tell us they can feel it.
I'm sure they do.
And I think ideally, we want to make matches that really have as tight of a bound as possible. And so, putting those parties together, I think, is going to do a lot to kind of improve that average case.
Yeah.
But that's an example of I would say a smaller change that, we're thinking about those types of changes kind of constantly. And then in addition to that, we've got, we have so many tunable parameters now on our matchmaker. You can kind of imagine it as like an instrument or something where like every little knob has to be kind of just right. And so, we've got probably hundreds of those at this point, and we're kind of constantly adjusting those. I would say, last week we adjusted twice. I think the week before it was like 3 times. It's almost kind of like a daily thing sometimes, especially, after this season 3 patch where we had a whole lot going in. And so there's kind of just like, we really want, every week matchmaking to get a little bit better. And, that's kind of the goal for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. And I think one of the sort of important thing is we're not just looking at like the averages. Like it's very easy for us, like from a data perspective, to look at like, hey, here's what the average is. But like the reality of matchmaking is something we've talked about together is the community's perception of matchmaking is usually defined by the absolute worst cases, like those 95, those 99th percentile like cases. And a lot of the adjustments we're doing aren't just to the average, but are to specifically like make those like worst cases better. In fact, we've talked about it, how we're willing to give up a little bit of like quality for the average just to make those worst cases better. So that's a lot of, and that's like just one of the many things that we've been like trying to like tune around. And this entire system is so complicated, and we've added this like major third axis of quality, not just in win expectation and actually like queue time, but now there's this like, hey, getting the roles to like, match together like appropriately, that finding the right knobs. A lot of times we're like, we'll make a change and we'll be like, that didn't do exactly what we thought it does, but it's like, it's cool that we know that like if we mess with that knob, that's what it does, because the system is so complex that like, and there's just constraints everywhere. And it's like by changing one constraint, the thing you didn't think really meant something, all of a sudden like becomes super important. And like, so, but we're trying, we're just like, it's, and a lot, again, it's just like almost daily, like changes, making sure it's like, we get immediate like responses from live ops. It's like, we really messed with queue times. Oops. Or we just get like a lot of like anecdotal feedback from everyone on the team and everyone on Reddit and like everyone, like, all the streamers, like the entire community, and all that feedback is super useful. Cause again, that's at the end of the day, what we're really trying to do is just make these matches. There's like the concept of mathematical absolute fairness, which I think we really like in Overwatch 1, like really concentrated on. But like in Overwatch 2, we're really trying to say it's like, all right, there's more to match quality than just that. And that's what you're seeing, like, with these like role delta changes, other changes that we're doing, like in future, like we know that, there's a lot of like, people saying it's like, wow, queue times in arcade can be really bad.
That's something we need to fix.
We're looking at that. There's other like things we've been like sort of looking at. It's like, it's like if you play quick play and then go in competitive, it's like the different like queues. Sometimes you can have like really different experiences, and we want to make a more holistic sort of view of like how skilled you are. There's a lot of things that we really want to improve going forward. That again, I think will, no matter how you play Overwatch, whether it's quick play, whether it's competitive, whether you're in bronze, whether you're in GM, will give you a better experience through matchmaking.
Yeah, I really appreciate how your team seems to be taking like a really analytical approach. And part of that is the data that we see in simulations before things go live. Part of that is looking at data after things have gone live. Part of that is listening to community feedback and seeing what the player experience is. Part of that is us experiencing it ourselves. It sounds like there's so many different routes and so many different avenues that affect our decision making. And for me, it's comforting to know that like this is a system that like we don't see ourselves like reaching the absolute perfect. Like this is something that we're going to continue to iterate on, and will always be growing and developing. As you said, almost daily matchmaker changes go in.
Absolutely. I think like I've thought of like, what is the ideal, matchmaker?
Which is funny,
Honestly, we are like so far away from what that could be.
Yeah, it hasn't.
It's really exciting because I think we just have, we have like a roadmap that could span years. That's like meaningful improvements every step of the way. And yeah, it's really important to stay grounded. I think
you were done this morning.
Like if you asked us a year ago what we thought would be important today in terms of matchmaking,
this like a podcast,
we wouldn't have given the same answer. Staying grounded, like you're saying, reading all the data, running hypotheses, testing, changes live. All of those are really good ways for us to, test our theories. I feel like our hit rate on, like if we make a guess of like, we think this is a good change, I think maybe we get it right about 25% of the time, something like that. Almost inevitably, when we're working on a change, something about that is going to challenge our initial conception of what we thought was going to happen. And so, very important to stay mindful of that.
it's part of the science, right? Like game dev being like an art and a science. Like we're
really
out
is,
here
yeah.
trying new things and not proving things to be true, but finding out what's not true and then iterating off of that. And I think that's really, really neat and really interesting. And I also really appreciate you framing up Matchmaker from the perspective of different game modes. I know that for me, when we first started having discussions about Matchmaker, I was approaching almost all of those discussions from a competitive perspective. But Matchmaker exists everywhere in Overwatch, and I really appreciate you painting the different like places in game, like how it affects quick play different than it affects competitive, and yeah, that's really interesting for me.
Just for the general understanding for everyone who might not be so intimately familiar with all those different systems in place for a matchmaker, are you using the same system for each and every different mode? Or do you have to make different kind of systems or like cut something out of one to make it work for arcade, to make it work for competitive, etc.?
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually that kind of speaks to kind of the complexity of the overall system. So we do have a single converged architecture that runs across all of our queues. The thing is, because we want something different out of competitive role queue versus, arcade, we have a lot of configuration that is kind of per queue. And we're actually working on kind of a new layer of that even, that gives us even more fine-tuned control. So, because at the end of the day, like there's some stuff that only runs for roll queue, like ironically I made this roll delta also work for non-roll queues because I really wanted to reuse the tech. So the way it works for non-roll queues, it's an interesting idea. In roll queues, you only ever have 2 of a single role on a given team at most, but in non-roll queues you have 5 players of no role, right? So I made the system care about the highest and lowest MMR player of each team. And kind of in that way, you can think of it as, a 5v, it's like 5 of role none versus 5 of role none. And we're still reusing the system. It needs to be tuned differently, but like we can kind of reuse some of the tech. So, sometimes it's kind of like, can we find a way to make the same system make sense across multiple queues? Because there's kind of actually a configurability nightmare if we have to manage like 30 different queues, all of which have subtly different behavior. It's like, if there's a problem with one, we're never even going to find that because it's like a needle in a haystack at that point.
Yeah.
So that's a great question, and it's a major it's something we think about a whole lot.
Awesome. I'd love to hear like any final thoughts on matchmaking, or if there are any other questions that you have, Zoe, or anything that you guys want to input. Otherwise, I think I'm going to shift gears and talk about competitive.
I'd love to dive into competitive, honestly.
Yeah, because
all right, let's
awesome.
go.
So yeah, let's do it. Awesome. So first I'd like to do kind of like a retrospective on the season 3 updates that we saw and kind of explain like why we made those changes.
Sure. So season 3,
and my headset
sort
right
of,
now.
we've done a few things like for competitive play. We changed the UI a little bit. We made the, we added specifically season 3, I guess this is where like so many patches.
Yeah.
I can't get them all straight in my head. We've added the ability to see your competitive update screen at like any time. And then the mid-cycle patch, I think we're adding in like newer buttons for that to make it like easier to get to. Like made that like really pretty. Then sort of like we've also like made some changes in anticipation of what we're doing in season 4, where the seasonal rank decay, we didn't put as much decay in. We nerfed it. Yeah, Morgan said it best. We basically nerfed it because in season 4. We're going to be removing that. So we didn't want to make it as much of a, what just happened. It's like one of the things that we've learned about like competitive play, like in Overwatch 2. We made some pretty big changes, and I honestly think we just didn't communicate those super well. So like one of the big sort of takeaways from competitive play leading up to this is just people don't understand how the system works. So a lot of the changes that we're working towards, especially like with season 4, is making things more clear for players.
Yeah.
Getting, because people want to have confidence in, what they're playing. What they want to be able to set goals. They want to be able. There's all these things they want to do, and when they don't understand how the system works, it sort of works against all that. So that's one of the big things. Oh, and yes, season 3, we also changed the number of like wins from 7 to 5.
Right.
Which that was an interesting change, and that was something where it was originally 7 for like a very interesting reason that I don't think we really talked about too much. What we shipped with as far as competitive play for Overwatch 2 wasn't everything that we wanted to ship with. One of the major features that we were looking forward to was this concept of being able to provide players with periodic information about how well they're performing, even potentially like on a hero basis. So the idea of like, hey, you have 7 wins. Out of those 7 wins, you played like these heroes. Hey, look at these, how well you performed on these heroes. Let's say you played like Soldier 76, Cassidy and Sojourn. Well, you played those heroes during those wins. Like, let's look at your accuracy. It's like, are you performing better or worse than like other players at your like skill rank? And we really like that concept because we want to provide information to players to help give them goals, to provide them with like information about, hey, how do you get better at competitive Overwatch 2?
Right, because we went from SR to something extremely granular to something that was a little more broader with the skill tier and division. Yeah. So it sounds like you really want to contextualize, like not just take away that granularity for the sake of making it less granular, but also it's very difficult, or it was very difficult to contextualize SR, like what you're talking about with how well am I performing compared to other Cassidy players, like that context, it wasn't there for SR, and it sounds like that's something we're moving towards.
Yeah, and becoming better at Overwatch 2, like if you're the type of player who's actively trying to improve, that's a long-term process, and we really didn't feel like an SR value that was changing after every game was really sort of setting the right signals like for that, because when you think about it, it's like, if matchmaking's doing an awesome job, you're going to win and lose about 50% of the time, right? And it's like if you're, it's like if you're improving, it's like that 50-50 will still sort of be there, but the quality of the teams that you're playing with, like the quality of the opponents, it sort of like goes up over time, like as you improve. So that was another sort of big thing about sort of changing the entire like SR change after every match to this competitive update system, is really just sort of like framing that in terms of a longer term journey for players, not concentrating on like individual matches, which are highly variable for a huge number of reasons. I mean, that's, we talk about Overwatch 2 competitive play. There's I think this idea that it's like, oh, I'm gold 3, so I'm going to play at a gold 3 like level, whatever that is, every single game. And in reality, it's like, all right, some games I like got super lucky, hit a bunch of headshots. Other games, it's like, oh my goodness, I made this most horrible mispositioning play.
Fell off Ilias.
And it was just like we lost a team fight. There's a lot of variation in that, which is why which again we sort of just wanted to spread out like the updates, because again, recognizing that like any individual game doesn't actually mean that much, really, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, so that was sort of a big thing. And again, to get back to the like another question we get from the community is like, why is it wins and not wins and losses? Well, because we wanted to do this report. One thing we know just from looking at stats is the stats you have whenever you win games are completely different than when you lose them. And if we were going to do any kind of like apples to apples comparison, because again, these reports were like something that like over time you would see them change, and you could get positive reinforcement saying it's like, oh, I'm getting better at this, because the idea was you see this report, it's like, oh, this is something I can get better at. You actively try to get better at that. You play not just to play, but you play with like, oh, I'm gonna like work on my my headshot accuracy, or I'm gonna work on particular like support ability, making sure that's more effective. Making my ults better. That I think was like interesting, but unfortunately we didn't ship with that. So that sort of like we had to like it's like, okay, if we're not going to do that, even though we want to still do it in the future, but like for now, let's like, you know, seven wins felt like too much. So that's why we changed it to 5, right? And that's sort of where we are at season 3. And now season 4, we can start talking about that. Are you ready?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Absolutely.
Cool. Season 4. So season 4, the big change that we're doing there is we're going to be removing the seasonal rank decay. So that was another aspect that we were trying to add in with Overwatch 2. Going back in time to Overwatch 1, we got a lot of feedback from players like over time where they felt like there wasn't really that much changes between seasons. There's a lot of like sort of pent up demand for this idea of it's like, I want sort of this, I'm going to use a strange word because if I say MMR reset, Morgan will freak out because that's like the most horrible idea ever.
Don't do it.
But there's this idea of it's like a new season starts. I want to like, you know, I want to refocus my efforts. You know, I want to like start this journey again towards working towards greater heights of my skill. And there was no real way to do that because for most players, what actually happens is they reach a certain skill and then they'll just sort of change around like different like, you know, tiers or now divisions. So the idea was we're going to like lower your division or your skill tier and division at the beginning of the season to provide that sort of moment of it's like, oh, I've got another goal to work towards. I can start this journey again. So that didn't quite outwork the way we wanted to for a couple of big reasons. And this is the big mea culpa moment of, you know, Overwatch 2 competitive play. One, we didn't explain what was happening. And that was sort of a big thing. People came away, it's like, wait, a new season just started. Why is my rank so much lower? Did I suddenly get worse? I don't feel like I got any worse in like Overwatch. It's like, why did this just go down? And so we didn't communicate what it was trying to do. And the other thing was for this sort of like system to create that journey, doing this every 2 months is probably too short. We looked at a lot of data with regards to like how many games of competitive people play. And there's a lot of them that maybe only play like 15 or 20 games, which isn't even like enough. The way we tuned it, it was going to take more than that to work your way back up to your quote unquote real skill level. And because they didn't get back to that, instead of this like virtuous journey of like, hey, I'm like going to get back, I'm going to like restart, I'm going to like, you know, try hard this time, I'm going to get like so much better at Overwatch 2. It was like we lowered them back down, they got back up a little bit, and then we lowered them back down, then we lowered them back down. And it didn't feel virtuous, it felt punitive, which is like not at all, we didn't want that at all.
Right.
So for those reasons, and again, just to make things clearer, we're just removing it. So when season 4 starts, when you first go to play competitive play, there'll be a message that pops up saying, hey, we're removing this. We're also just sort of removing like all the effects of it. So we're like resetting everyone back to like what their quote unquote actual like skill is. So we'll pop a little up dialogue indicating, hey, this is what your previous ranks were back in season 3, and here's your new ones in season 4. Again, with the idea that, hey, we need to fully explain what's happening, because when we don't explain things, it's not good.
I'm glad that, you know, you guys are here to talk to us about this. Like being here and communicating with us and the players it means a lot.
I mean, same sentiment here. Like the transparency is really, really so important, especially with systems which are just so complicated, so intricate. And as you said, you turn one knob and then everything else changes. So like there is a lot of communication which needs to happen in order for the people who play the game to really understand why things are happening the way they are. I do want to ask though, why do people or shouldn't people want a full MMR reset? Because still, like that is what people like. I see that so often in the community. It's like, why don't they just reset it? Please tell them why that's not what they want.
Yeah, it's a good question. So like, you know, I can understand the sentiment, right? It's like, you know, if you feel like your MMR is not where it should be or something like that, you're like, just reset it all, right? it's really actually kind of fascinating. We have millions of players, and if you think about it, most of those players have never actually played each other, right? So by default, if we throw all of the ratings that we have out, we're losing a whole lot of information. Like our current view of everybody's skill, your individual skill may not be calibrated, but the system as a whole embeds a whole lot of knowledge about the relationship between all of these players, most of whom who've never actually played against each other. Like in chess, you have like ELO or something. And the community of chess players is somewhat small, and like you'll go to these tournaments and like everybody's kind of playing each other, and it kind of makes sense. But in Overwatch, like we don't really have that. Like unless you're on top 500 or something, then you're actually playing with other all the other people. That's a separate problem. But generally with ratings, it's like we really want to have some view of everybody's skill, and even a rough view is much better than no information, because what happens if we throw all of it out is you'll get games where like bronze players are playing against top 500 players, and we've actually done that internally, right? Because like we have bronze players on our team and top 500 players on team 4, right? And so like in those playtests, like those are not fun playtests.
Yeah.
It turns
really
out
not.
that matches only really feel fun in a very, very narrow difference of skill. Otherwise, one team's just going to stomp the other team. Overwatch is a very decisive game, and being like platinum versus gold, like that's a very noticeable difference in skill. And so, all of that information that the ratings have in aggregate, it's extremely valuable. Like, whenever somebody asks about MMR, I'm like, no, don't touch the MMRs.
Yeah, I mean, you essentially just break the entire matchmaking if you throw out the MMRs, right?
Yeah.
Because the information is not going to be there. That means that the roll delta graph is going to go all the way up again.
Roll delta goes to 0.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
But not in a good way.
Yeah. I think there's there's a little bit of like misunderstanding about like how long it would take for the system to like readjust.
Mm-hmm.
When these conversations come up, the people would be like, "Oh, it'll just probably take a month," and it's like, no, you don't understand like how many like it's months, like years, like it's actually interesting in the sense of with Overwatch 2 coming out, we're going free to play. It's like all these like new players. There is a little bit of like our matchmaking has technically gotten worse just because we have this mass number of people that we don't know much about them, right? People try to compare like how Overwatch 1 matchmaking was right before we shipped Overwatch 2. And that's where we had players who had played a ton of games. They played a lot of heroes. They've played all the maps. They've gone through like multiple metas. They were all like very knowledgeable, and like the matchmaker's view of their skill was reasonably accurate. But when you bring in new players, think about like all the things they potentially like have to learn. Again, all the heroes on their particular role within just one role, all the different maps. Again, like they haven't been through like multiple different meta swings. And when we talk about like what the matchmaker's view of the skill is, it's not as simple as like, hey, I won game, like I get better, I lose game. It is, but like the reality is
the amount is
like different. But like the other thing is that like as a new player, the matchmaker can think you're of a certain skill because you've been playing, let's say like you've been playing Soldier 76. And you've been having a good amount of success, right? But you're a new player, you're like, all right, I feel like I'm doing well in Soldier 76. I'm going to switch to Cassidy. All right. At that point, the matchmaker's view of their skill is wrong again because you're on a completely like new hero, right? We also see other like sort of changes. Again, and it's been great to see all this. Like we love it, all these like new friends bringing other friends to play Overwatch 2 who hadn't played it before. But when you play with like different groups of friends, that can sort of change what your skill is, because you might play with your friends differently than you would play like solo where you're like super tryharding, right?
Yeah.
Like the matchmaker, like all it really, it really just has this like one view of what you are. And with new players, lots can happen to that. So that's again why we're like so scared witless about like, like this talk of like MMR reset, because it would it would literally take like he mentioned it, years,
Yeah, I
really,
think
to like sort of
years.
build up this like combined knowledge about like all the players. And when you think about like all the different accounts they have on all the different roles, it's mind-boggling.
I'm not sure if we want to share information on this, but I'm curious if you can give us a little
Fucking
more insight
reset it.
into
Reset
like,
it.
new
Stop being a bunch of
players
bitches.
versus
Reset the
veteran
fucking
players. Like you were
MMR.
mentioning, like for Overwatch 1, we had all this like data.
You should have
and
done
then
it to
We
launch.
launch Overwatch 2, and a lot of these players carry over, but we also have new maps. We have a new game mode. We have new heroes, and we have a lot of
Right
new
now I have our
players.
numbers to
So
work with.
I'm curious what your insight is there.
Yeah,
Your
that's
fucking
interesting.
numbers
Like
suck.
we've definitely like, so new players are something we've definitely like looked at pretty closely. Like we want to try to, again, because the matchmaker has so little understanding of, just how good they are. And everything the matchmaker is based upon is this idea of like, how good are you? Right. So we can match you up with other people of that same like sort of skill. And that's something where we've like tried to do our best. We've done things with regards to trying to like start them off at like a better place, so they're not like the situation we don't want is like, hi, I'm a new player of Overwatch, and we totally like misevaluate your skill and you lose a bunch of games because we think you're way better than you are. So we've done work on that regard.
Yeah, we did a whole lot actually. Like, when we were working on the launch of Overwatch 2, we knew, that we were going to have a ton of new players show up. And we also knew that we were going to have a ton of people who had like played Overwatch years ago come back. And so, we built systems specifically to, try to make those players' experience as good as possible. And, as a result of that, make everybody else's experience playing with those new players as good as possible too. So yeah, we did the, we very carefully tuned kind of the new player experience in terms of like what their ratings look like when they enter the game, kind of how much uncertainty we have about them, how fast we move their ratings. One thing that's like the bane of my existence is when people do like unranked to GM, like they make a fresh account and then like play to GM, because like their first several matches are really bad. So like we added a system to try to kind of like, hey, you're like on a win streak that we don't expect you to be on. Your MMR should probably be way different than what it is. So thankfully, we've like shrunk the number of matches that it takes for somebody to like kind of calibrate when they're just coming into the system by quite a bit.
I do feel called out here. But I never made it to GM, so it's not really about me.
And just to be clear, please don't do that.
Yeah, please.
Please don't do that.
Yeah.
And then also like for returning players, we did a lot of work to kind of model like we kind of do decay players when they come back if they've been gone for a really long time, just to try to kind of like ease them a bit in. And then also we increase our uncertainty about them too. So it's like we're kind of like much more willing. Yeah, I mean, we treat them a little bit more like a new player because it's like, we don't know what you've been doing for the past 2 years. Maybe you've been, not playing video games at all. Maybe you've been like playing a different shooter and you're even better, right? So yeah, a whole lot of work that went in kind of at launch to really try to get ahead of a lot of those things. But, still a whole lot of new players, a whole lot of new uncertainty in the system.
Yeah.
And we've been dealing with it. I think, that's probably the type of thing that'll just get better over time as people keep playing. Just, yeah. It's the answer to every question is always just play more games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To reduce that uncertainty. That's how we do it. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
And to give the matchmaker a better like view of like how good you are. Yeah. It's like, that's sort of like the two things that sort of solve all like, matchmaking things, like play more games and have
Always
more
play
people
more
playing games so there's even more people to potentially match you
Yeah.
with.
Yeah.
Right.
I was just wondering what the team's stance is on actually displaying the team ranks, like when heading into a game in competitive. Like, is that something discouraging? Because like very often back when there was like the team MMR in the versus screen right at the beginning, your team immediately, if they have a lower SR, would go like, oh well, we lose. So like immediate defeat kind of attitude. What's the stance from your team about displaying those kind of SRs, MMRs?
So that brings us to another change in season 4. Ha! There you go, Zoe.
There it is.
Not quite like everything I think you were asked for, but like we are going to display like before like a competitive match in that like sort of team screen. at least what the average like for this particular like game is. So, you can see it's like, hey, this is a Platinum 4 match. It just to give you sort of like a better idea. It's like, maybe I'm a little bit better than everyone in here, or maybe I'm a little bit worse. It gives you some information about that. Again, like we definitely like seeing the feedback with regards to like, hey, I just want to see like what everyone's like sort of values are. Some of that I think is positive. Like we do get very pointed feedback about the matchmaker when that happens, which that doesn't really bother us. But I think it's more just that we don't want like players to necessarily like hone in on like precisely like what those like values are, because a lot of times they'll sort of like they'll make judgments about the match before they've even played it.
Yeah,
like a self-fulfilling prophecy,
right? And that could be like that could be really negative, right? It's like, because again, like we're not going to put you in like a super horrible match. Morgan was talking earlier about it's like 55-45, like it sounds horrible, but it's like, no, you win 45% of the time, right? And it's like, it's the kind of thing of like, it's still worth going in and trying your hardest, right? It's something that I think over time, and especially like as we're making like all these like matchmaking changes, and we're trying to do like all these like tuning things, it's something that we might like put back like in the future, but for now, we're gonna like take baby steps, which is the, like putting in the like what is the like sort of rank of this particular match.
We've been talking about it a lot. I mean, there's a challenge because it's like we want to show players more about matches, right? Like we want to kind of show, how good these matches are. But it's hard because it's like finding ways, like the charts that I was showing earlier, like those are kind of hard, especially if like it's on a screen that you're just seeing for a few seconds. Like, kind of understanding some of that information can be difficult. And also, like Scott was saying, we don't want to create a situation where somebody's going to like, not try their hardest because
we've already lost.
Like it's interesting. Like in StarCraft, actually, they used to show this where it was like, oh, your team or you are favored to win, or the enemy is favored to win, and like that, that kind of works in a 1v1 game where you can be like, okay, I might lose this match, but in a team match where it's like your team is not favored to win. Then it's like, well, why? Are my teammates bad? Like,
but all the better it feels when you're actually winning as the underdog, though. Like that's a confidence booster.
Yeah. So if we could only get the good side of it, if we could only get the positive without the negative, then sure. But
again, it's hard to talk about a lot about like match. Like this is the matchmaker's view of your quality, and like, we can't just hit you with a bunch of math and like weird numbers that, like that we're looking at. And because again, like we really want to make competitive play understandable. Right. So we just have to like, we'd have to be like very careful of what we display to players, that they don't inadvertently, take that information like the wrong way. It's like,
because so much of it needs to be contextualized, right? Like
it's so much of
information.
And again, it's like none of these numbers are absolute at the end of the day, right? It's like this is the matchmaker's current like best view of like what this match is, but it's like, who knows? It's like maybe like once it makes the match, what everyone plays has a way bigger effect than like just putting the people in. It's like, is everyone playing like the super like hard meta like picks? What if someone's like trying something like different? It's like there's all these like different effects that once you actually get into the match, that
we've been trying to study that a lot lately, actually. Like what causes one-sided matches? Because it doesn't feel fun to like lose and you feel like you got stomped.
And people blame the matchmaker for that.
Yeah,
100%.
And it's funny, like we've been trying really hard to, like really the problem there is like, what signal can we see that is actually predictive of like a stomp? And so far, we really haven't come up with a whole lot. We found a few things, that we've been able to kind of fix at the edges, but kind of the core problem just seems, like if one person's like having an off day, 4v5 is not, you don't win a 4v5. So,
and even if someone's not having a bad day, it's like it's like two teams trying their hardest. It's like someone's going to win that first team fight.
Yeah.
And the nature of Overwatch, it's like you win the first team fight, that gives you a little bit of like, ultimate economy edge. That potentially like gives you like an advantage, like on the second team fight. Like there's things that, like, again, the matchmaker can't solve all those like kind of problems. It really can't, unfortunately.
You can see it on like control maps where, like, on point, on the first point, like one team might just like roll the other team, and it's like, oh my god, like this is such a one-sided match. And then the next point, it happens the other way, and it's like, okay, wait, that happens all the time. And so it's like, in that case, that's probably actually a balanced match.
Yeah, I mean, you can only do so much math. At the end of the day, it's people playing, right? And turns out humans are not super consistent.
No, we're not robots, right?
Something I am excited for, though, I think, oh my goodness. For season 4, aren't we providing more context to the competitive updates to kind of help people understand how they're doing?
Thank you, Jody. Yes, we are. So one other thing we've been sort of asked for is, hey, we show you how many wins you have. Can we see how many losses and ties? And we're going to provide that.
I don't know why it's picking up stuff.
Again, and not providing that is one of the things that made it seem like, it's like a competitive update happens, and sometimes I went up a division, sometimes I went down a division. And a lot of that was confusion because we didn't actually show you like the losses. And and again, because we're all human, we sometimes forget about losses, just like we forget about like that leave that we might have had because with family emergency or something like that, and we do penalize for leaves as well. So yeah, we're including like more information there, specifically like the losses and ties.
And the breakdown of where you are.
Oh, yes. Well, okay. In specific, not so much like, so once you actually complete an update, again, because like within a division, there's actually like there's a fair amount of wiggle room there. We got feedback saying it's like, hey, I went 5-4 and I didn't go up a division. It's like, Blizzard, why? It's because it's like, okay, you were actually like just barely into one division, and like you actually like you did go up. It's just it was all within one division. Mm-hmm. So again, to try to make things like more clear about like what's going on, and that like, yes, it's like your 5-4 record does mean it went up at the point where you actually get that rank update after the 5 wins. We will be showing you like where you are within that particular division. And if you're someone who's between like GM1 and like the bottom of top 500, because there's this point where it's like, okay, how far do I need to get before I'm actually in top 500? And that's not a lot of people, but it's like enough people. We've definitely heard the feedback that it's like, I want to know like how close I am. We'll also be indicating how close you are to achieving top 500 through a percentage. So again, more information about like your updates, more clarity as far as here's how you played and these are the results.
I really appreciate that. And something else that we're doing for season 4 that I'm really excited about are the competitive reward changes. So can we talk a little bit about like what that's going to look like and why we made that decision to change competitive rewards? Yeah,
so we're changing the competitive rewards. And again, to be specific here, these are these competitive points that you gain for playing competitive Overwatch that you use to purchase the golden guns. This isn't anything with challenges specifically, but like one thing we've always noted is that like if you're playing in bronze, like the difference between like how many competitive points we give you for like a bronze or even like a gold and like someone who's a grandmaster was really huge. So a lot of what we're doing is just like providing more competitive points at the end of a season for everyone, like up through grandmaster. Grandmaster's going down a little bit like at the end of the season, but the flip side is we want to reward people who play more like during the season. And we definitely like saw sort of thing of it's like, oh, it's like I've got my like gold 3 rank, or I'm done. Like there's no real reason to play like competitive play anymore. And it's like, hey, if you enjoy playing Overwatch, it's like, hey, here's some more competitive points. So we're upping the number of competitive points you get for a win, and also a tie. Because you do get a little bit like for a tie. We're upping that as well. Again, just to give people a little bit more. Hey, if you're playing a lot, we want to like respect the fact that you are playing a lot, because hey, by playing a lot, you're making the matchmaker better.
Let's go.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I know another thing that's coming in. Actually, this is the mid-cycle patch. This is live right now. But we also have competitive mystery heroes coming to the game.
Oh boy, competitive mystery heroes. We are like,
yes.
We are really excited about this because the chaos is going to be so exquisite.
I know. In the meeting, I asked Scott to like explain competitive mystery heroes, and he just said, it's chaos.
Yeah, it's just going to be great. It's the kind of thing of like, it's like people like really like trying hard and like trying to win this, but at the same time, it's like they have no control over the heroes. They have no control over their team compositions. So in some ways, it's actually the people who do well in competitive mystery heroes. We're going to like flex their like skill in a way that like actually normal competitive play doesn't, because they're just going to be super flexible.
Yeah, you got to be good at everything.
You got to be good at everything.
In all
like,
situations.
all the roles, all the heroes, all the maps. But that being said, we are like doing something. We do know that like competitive mystery heroes, like it's like we love chaos, but like we don't like just, there are limits to our levels of chaos. We did put in a rule that basically says you can only like have when it randomizes the heroes, it's only going to create team comps at like the maximum of 3 if any roll. So that was again sort of like prevent some of the like the worst or weirdest compositions. And then also we are doing because this isn't like a roll queue setup. Right. This is also going to have the change that we made with regards to tanks and open queue or like non-roll queues. That sounded weird, but it's accurate. So they're going to have like lower health. So again, trying to make that like overall like, it's like we want fair and balanced, but chaotic.
Crazy.
But crazy.
That's still balanced.
How do you even make that balanced, like in a competitive sense? Like mystery heroes, like how do you balance those teams from a competitive standpoint?
I mean, any individual game, the result is going to be like even more random, right?
Yeah.
In the sense of it's like, you'll have some games where someone happened to like, roll into like their best hero and like, they play really well on it and maybe like dominate, and like, it's like, all I got were my off-roll champions and so forth. And like, that's fine, but everyone's having that experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's always like some balancing out there. And sort of, it's actually kind of like sort of an interesting thing about like Mr. Heroes. It's like when you do lose, it's like you can just blame. It's like, oh, we just had bad team comps.
Yeah, it's good excuse.
It's like you won't even blame the matchmaker, right? It's great. It's like hey, I just like I didn't roll a great set of heroes. But if you play enough, then like all that kind of variance will balance out, and the people that are better at playing more of the heroes should rise to the top of the leaderboards, right? That's the theory.
Well, and also dealing with uncertainty. Like I actually play Mystery Heroes a lot. I love the mode. It's such a fun mode. And one of the things that's really cool about Mystery Heroes is, so like normally in Overwatch, it's very deterministic, right? Like you have control over kind of everything, or your team does at least, except whether you win, I guess. But like in games like Hearthstone, for example, kind of like dealing with randomness and uncertainty is like a very inherent part of the game. And so that is like a skill, actually. It's like if you roll a Mercy and your team already has 3 supports or something, like kind of like, how do you play that? Do you like, do you want to stay on Mercy
or
do you
and die?
Yeah, do you want to go in and die? Like,
that's what I'd
just jump it.
Yeah.
So there's like a very interesting kind of like strategic layer that, it is a little bit crazy, but at the same time, there's a lot of thought that you can kind of put in that's, it's very dependent on like, how good am I with this hero? What's my team's team comp? What's the enemy team comp? And kind of doing that whole like calculus to try to figure out like, is this actually a good hero for me to like kind of try to hold on to or not? Or should I just,
So we think at the end of that competitive season, the people that are at the top of the leaderboard, they'll deserve to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, definitely.
those
Because
are
they're-
some Swiss Army knives of Overwatch.
Yes,
Sure.
absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, we'll see how that goes. Like I said, there's a lot of excitement about it. I mean, there's lots of fans of Mystery Heroes,
Oh, absolutely.
on the team. I think it's still like our most favorite. It's like our most played
Yeah,
arcade.
it's a really
It's our most
popular
played
game mode.
arcade
Because we
card.
all like chaos.
Yes,
so much fun.
Yes,
We're chaotic.
yes, yes.
I do
Embrace
wonder,
it.
this might be a really stupid question. The answer might be
Oh.
super obvious, and I just don't know. But does the result I have in a competitive Mystery Heroes, like obviously that's locked on my account, like that's my MMR for Mystery Heroes, does that bleed into other competitive, like normal competitive play or like quick play? So if I say I get really unlucky very often in Mystery Heroes by rolling off heroes constantly, and then obviously I'm losing all of those games, but I technically do good in normal competitive play, will the other MMR affect that MMR and
That's
my
a-
account overall?
That's a really good question. So for
Yes.
competitive modes, each rating, because it's tied to a rank, it's player visible. Those are very distinct. So like you can do whatever you want in competitive Mystery Heroes, and it will not have any impact on the other game modes. For unranked, we do have a little bit more kind of like of a shared understanding of your ratings. Because in those modes we're really just trying to optimize for like fair matches with a 50% win rate. But for ranked, we're showing you those ranks. We're not changing those out from underneath you. So like that rank is just for competitive Mystery Heroes.
Yeah. So when you
Okay.
lose in competitive Mystery Heroes, you're not gonna need to get upset and say like, oh my, am I gonna lose?
I ruined
Am I
it
gonna
all.
lose GM? No, it's
No.
like no, don't worry
No,
about
you
that.
don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
I'm pretty excited to try out competitive Mystery Heroes.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm cool.
all here
Super
for the
excited.
chaos.
So
Yeah.
could we have Overwatch League play competitive Mystery Heroes? Do you think?
I'll,
Like just for season
I mean,
22?
yes. I'll spearhead that idea. I think that's gonna go down really well.
Okay. I'm excited.
Awesome. Well, this has been really helpful, and we really appreciate the insight. And I know throughout this we've kind of talked about how we should have communicated this, or like we should have done this better. And
Yeah.
I just really appreciate you guys taking the time to be here and like really outline this for the community. And I'm really happy with everything that you guys said. I appreciate the insight, and it's been epic talking with you guys. These are really important topics to our community. So,
Yeah, we should do this again.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for joining
Thank
us.
you guys so much.
Yeah, and sharing
thank
your
you.
thoughts. And we talked about all the factors that go into changing Matchmaker, and like this is true for Matchmaker, it's also true for our game, but community sentiment and community feedback means a lot to us. We see you, we hear you, and we are implementing that into our plans, and it helps us make decisions. So please keep sharing your feedback. We're really happy to have these conversations with players, and thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you in the mid-cycle patch.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Thanks.
100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 100 squats, then a 10-kilometer run.